Millions of people are flooding airports and highways. Right at this hour, a record 17 million travelers are expected to hit the nation's airports. But if you are traveling by car, good news. Gas prices at their lowest level since 2021. CNN's business editor-at-large and host of Quest Means Business, Richard Quest, joins me now. Richard, you've taken things outside for Summer Friday. I noticed you didn't take me, but okay. You are not the only one out there, though.
No, so driving season, prices are lower for fuel, and there's an entire range of reasons. Number one, supply has been fairly steady, despite threats in the Gulf, in the Red Sea, and to shipping lanes. Supply has remained steady, and therefore geopolitical pressures, whilst they are worrisome, have not come to fruition. Secondly, the Petroleum Strategic Reserve. The Biden administration has consistently released reserves into the market, which has taken the pressure off prices. Of course, Donald Trump is making a big deal about that in the election campaign. Put it all together, and you have basically prices under control at the moment. But don't be fooled for 1 second, Paula. It would only take a serious eruption in the Gulf to threaten supplies, and they'd be off to the races again.
Now, what would it take to disrupt, as he just got to talking about, what would it take? I mean, humanity wants to stay in control, and they want to feel like that they are in control of this planet and the elements thereof the planet. So what exactly would it take to disrupt the stability and the security of this energy called crude oil? Well, several things could happen. A war, a nuclear bomb, an earthquake, a major force of nature catastrophe such as an tsunami, tidal wave, or whatever, a volcano erupting or whatever. Yesterday, I was in Paris, Tennessee, Henry County, and I paid $2.65 a gallon for gasoline. That's the cheap stuff that's mixed with 10% ethanol. I'll agree. Gasoline right now is probably fluctuating in a way that is better for the consumer out of his pocket. But let's not be ignorant of the fact that we're not going further away from the darkness. We're actually still going further into it, especially whenever they say that this Labor Day is going to meet all-time records pertaining to people flying on airlines, and that's going to be that much more being oil distracted from the earth, taken away from the earth. And as we're doing that, we're putting more carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere. And I know whenever I talk, people are going to say, oh, him again. Oh, he's the negative guy that wants to take us away from the pleasures of using crude oil. No, I do not want to take anybody the pleasures from anything. What I want to do is warn the public in regards towards if we continue on this path that we're on, and obviously we are on this trajectory, because if we wasn't, I feel like that the governments, not government, but governments would have already clamped down on privileged airline activity. I can understand if FedEx, I can understand if food, I can understand if precious resources has to come from one side of the earth to the other, because we're no longer living on a small planet, but we're living on an open planet that we have elevated into a international global society. I understand that. There are certain things that you cannot eliminate or do away with. But as the storms get worse, as the heat intenses, as the oceans melt, as people get hungry and hungrier, and once survival sets in, that's whenever you're going to have these multiple clashes with not just the superpowers, but basically beginning at the smaller countries. Because the smaller countries can't handle this. They can't handle this. From an economical standpoint or any other way, they cannot handle this. And basically the smaller countries will start out first with their civil wars, and then eventually it will lead into a final phase pertaining to a major calamity, pertaining to a world war. Now, according to the way that I understand a world war that my dad talked about, being raised up basically poor, very poor, either in Tennessee or in Chicago, being reared up, that whenever the war broke out, it had become so crucial to so many different people that they immediately started restricting fuel. In other words, you got like S&H green stamps. I'm going to use S&H green stamps for example. Probably a lot of people don't even know what S&H green stamps are. But they gave out entitlements or tokens. And once you used up a certain amount of those tokens, then you could no longer go to the gas station and get any more gas. They not only done that with fuel during World War II, but they done that with rubber. They done that with many other different resources that was primarily projected to the military, regardless whether it was Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, whoever, because we was at a critical state. What I'm getting at, if we are really, really real, in which I don't think that we are, pertaining to global warming, I feel like that the governments, once more, the governments would have put some sort of restrictions on people in telling them, okay, you can fly, but you can only fly this amount of hours or this amount of time. In other words, even though you're rich and you want to fly back and forth from one equator to another 100 different times in a year, that should be eliminated. That should absolutely be eliminated, because people got that kind of money to waste on airline tickets. You know, I think they got such a thing now to where if you're considered a multi-flyer, you actually get big discounts on your flights. I'm not going to go as far as to say that needs to be taken away, but what I am going to say is that the governments need to mandate flying restrictions in how many times and how many hours a person can fly. Now, there's different people that has different occupations. There's business people and etc. that are constantly having to go to different places and evaluate and make assessments and bid and etc. That's priority. That's considered priority. Just like FedEx, just like food, just like medicine. Those are all priority issues, and we can't stop those priorities, because that's basically our essential way of life, regardless whether it's coming from America or China or some other country. Because lots of these other countries rely upon us just as much as we rely upon them. Why? Because we have become an international global entity on the planet. But whenever you get to talking about all the different airlines going to break all these records, all these people going to be on the road again, spending all this money, you know, and I've really looked at this from a deeper angle. If the oil manufacturers, the oil tycoons, if they was to have raised the prices intentionally, trying to stifle or stop people from traveling as much, I could understand the reason why that they've done all the price hiking that has basically thrown the economy, not just the economy in America, but the world economy off into a whirlwind. I could maybe understand that if that was their primary purpose for raising all the oil prices, but that wasn't. They raised the oil prices out of greed. They wanted to take advantage of not just the American people, but the world during the time that we was all reeking over COVID. Of all times for them to have pulled the wool, or tried to pull the wool, over different people's eyes, they decided to do it during that time. White man speaketh with forked tongue. They talk about global warming. They talk about the oceans rising. They talk about these storms intensifying. They talk about the storms now are more proactive whenever they do come. They come in a much more harsher way, etc. But yet, no, we're not seeing true government restrictions upon this type of activity pertaining to the wealthy and the rich. I don't have no problem at all, just like I don't have no problem at all in somebody coming to America and wanting to build their life in a better way and become over here legally and do things in the proper form. I support that 100% because it was the immigrants, basically, regardless whether it's Ireland, Greenland, or wherever, that come to America that helped to build America. And America would not be the great nation that America is if it was not for our immigrants. And if you can't acknowledge that and accept that, then something's wrong with you. But there has to be limitations. The Bible talks about do not throw your pearls before the swine. Why did he say that? Because people was going to take advantage of you. People was going to use you. They was going to eat you up. They was going to basically take full advantage of you. And then once somebody like China gets powerful enough, or some of these other countries get self-sustainable enough, it's like, we'll poo-poo on America. We could care less about the Americans. Once more, Christ said, do not throw your pearls before the swine. In other words, you can be too good for your own good, and that's exactly what has went on in the past 30 plus years because of this major movement that went on in trying to stifle the Windmill Ministries missions from being able to be effective and basically do that in which what it was called to do. Now, I don't claim to be a perfect individual. Matter of fact, I got all kinds of demons that I'm still fighting to this day in my closets that I know that I haven't fully whipped, regardless whether it's psychological demons, physical demons, spiritual demons, emotional demons, financial demons. I mean, there's lots of different areas that you can look at and say, well, these are areas that I haven't fully whipped. And I understand that. You know, I've never walked on water. I haven't never raised the dead. I haven't never healed a leopard or somebody with a bad disease that I know of. And the thing about it is, I won't never be able to do these things on my own. If I ever do become so anointed in the power of God that people does get healed, and there is a major movement pertaining to a supernatural movement, it won't be me. It will not be me. It will be God working through me as a tool, as an instrument for the kingdom of God. And that's the same way with any true born-again Christian. They should never try to take the recognition of themselves towards only themselves in thinking that, oh, because this doctor is this great doctor, he must be such of a fabulous man that we need to bow down to him and turn him into a goddess. No. I don't care if you're an American doctor. I don't care if you're from India. I don't care wherever you're from. That wisdom and that knowledge was given to you by God as a gift. And now because you was gifted in that area, now you've decided to make a living out of it and basically share your gifts with the rest of society in trying to help humanity. There's nothing in the world wrong with that. But don't put yourself on a pedestal by saying, oh, look what I can do. Oh, it's me, it's I. No, whenever that starts occurring, that's whenever God will bring you down a notch or two in humbling you and realizing that, hey, if it wasn't for the Holy Spirit working with you and through you, and because of the gifts that God and the talents that God has given you, you never would have become that successful person, regardless whether it was a doctor, regardless whether it was a business consultant, regardless of what. But getting back to the oil, I put out a message, I know at least 3 years ago, up here in Martin, Tennessee, while looking in front of the city hall, where they got 2 electrical charging stations there. I don't know how many more they got now all over town. Some people are actually putting them in their house, at their houses now. Most of your parks, I noticed the other day whenever I was in Clarksville that they actually have charging stations now a lot of places in your hospitals. Basically, wherever there's a public facility at, you're going to have the state independently trying to push the fact of these charging stations, in which that's a good thing. That's a real good thing. It's a good thing that I paid $2.65 yesterday for gasoline. That's a good thing. What the bad thing of it is, we still have not learned that, or identified that we are on this trajectory of doom and gloom, and unless we see a major movement coming from humanity, it's only going to get worse. I mean, last night, I noticed that it stayed hot until, give or take, about 9 o'clock, especially in these open parking lots, because of how the parking lot itself, the highway system, holds heat. Concrete holds heat. I even made mention to a person in Walmart, Paris. It was probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock, because it being so hot, that I had tried to give out my opinion of how could we possibly help in changing the temperature from going from a blacktop to maybe a brown blacktop. Since I have made mention of that, which was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I have noticed that there are certain places, like down in Phoenix, Arizona, Tucson, where it gets super, super hot. That's what they're diverting over to, is a lighter color. Whenever you see all them Arabs over there and they're all wearing white, they're not wearing white necessarily because that's their favorite color. They're wearing white because white reflects heat. That's one of the things that is causing the planet to heat up even that much more, is that as our ice, regardless whether it's the North Pole or the South Pole, continues to keep melting, not only is it going to be damaging in the fact of the waters rising, but as the snow and the ice melts, then there's nothing to reflect that heat back up into the atmosphere, and then the planet warms up even that much more. In other words, one problem creates another problem, kind of like a dominoes effect, pertaining to this problem that we're on. And I'm just afraid that unless society does an about face immediately, I cannot stress hard enough and long enough in how severe that this is. You know, the people in the First Baptist Church up here in Martin, Tennessee, along with Randy Brundridge and certain people in the area that knows about my testimony and knows about some of the occurrences that went on in my life in Martin, Tennessee, about the time that Randy Brundridge decided to basically take it upon himself towards having me physically removed by 3 different officers from Martin, Tennessee, out of Central Baptist Church. They don't realize how come I was so gung-ho in wanting to go up into the upper part of the First Baptist Church and make out another 100 CDs and get my message out to the people. They still haven't identified, first of all, that I was given permission by Benny of doing that worked for public broadcasting out of Union University. There was no way that I would do that upon my own accord. And secondly, they still haven't identified what was so urgent about Mr. Jackson having to go up here and make another 100 DVDs. And until they come to their senses in understanding how crucial that all this is, I'm basically going to be whistling Dixie. And that's exactly the imagery that they want to put, not just me, but Al Gore and everybody else that continues to keep telling people about the problem that's coming over the horizon that nobody wants to take serious. Proof is in the pudding. If our governments was truly sincere in trying to stop global warming, I think that they would put restrictions upon the wealthy pertaining to just getting on an airplane. I mean, you got people that's got enough money that can get in an airplane in Tennessee, fly down to Miami, Florida, have a big meal in the afternoon, fly back to Tennessee, get a night's sleep, and then be back to work the next morning, just like it's a everyday day in the park. The poor man, the working man, can't do that. Probably won't never be able to do that. But these rich people can. And it doesn't matter if it costs $5,000 an hour to crank up them big machines and send it in the air 400 or 500 miles an hour. That's what they do because they got money to waste. Well, in the meantime, while they got money to waste, they're, instead of them being the solution to the problem, they're actually being the problem. Because once more, they're adding insult to injury pertaining to all these problems. In addition to draining all the oil out of the ground, it was put there for a reason that eventually the world's going to see, and it may not be in my lifetime, but the world's going to see the things that I'm telling them about, that the oil was put there as a heat shield, and the oil was put there for a friction remover, and the oil was put there to help keep everything glued together. One day the world's going to see these advisories and warnings that I continue to keep telling people about was real. And once more, I cannot emphasize on the urgency of this enough. I just can't. In trying to save humanity. How can you save a group of people that doesn't want to save themselves?
Absolutely. I've actually been surprised at the resiliency given all the geopolitical risk out there, but I digress because, Richard, you're outside by the Brooklyn Bridge today to talk summer tourism and infrastructure. And I'm actually intrigued by this. You got to speak to the great-great-grandson of the chief engineer of that bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. We take it for granted. There it is, magnificent in all its splendor, the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's a great thing to walk across or to ride a bike across. We take it for granted. But when this was built in the last but one century, in the 19th century, when it was built and then opened, it was actually a marveling of engineering, because New York and Brooklyn were two different cities. And the technology to build this thing was not really known. They had made it up as they went along. Listen to Christopher Riebling. He is the great-great-great-grandson of the original engineer, whose son then took it over, whose hand then took it over. Have a listen and it'll become clear.
The aspect of how they were going into the dark when they created it, because most structures that are so ambitious and grand are created with immense levels of safety nets, which is simply previous knowledge. And so much of this bridge was built and designed figuring out the science and the technology behind it as they were doing it.
So, Paula, the technology, basically, they used to drop the divers or the construction workers in big caissons to the ground, watertight compartments. They dug away at the foundations. They then created this span. And that's why tonight's Westminster Business comes to you from Pier 17, one of the most popular places in New York to visit, tourist attractions in the city, and with this spectacular view of the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, where are you, Paula? Why aren't you here to have an ice cream with me?
There's still time, Richard. I'm going to finish this show, and you never know, I could pop up there. I want to ask you. I don't have a lot of time.
I'm buying.
Excellent. You always do, I have to say. You're kind that way. I'm always curious. The great-great-grandson, did he go into the family business? An engineer? No?
I'm sorry? I didn't hear the...
Did Chris, the
No,
great-great-grandson,
no,
go
he's
into...
not.
No, he didn't.
No. And he was at pains to point out to me, not only is he not the family business, but he's not a geek, and he doesn't live by the Brooklyn Bridge, and he doesn't live for the Brooklyn Bridge. He just enjoys the Brooklyn Bridge, and he wasn't strange.
Oh, that is so good to hear, because I'm not sure if you were going to answer that question in the next hour in your show. I will be watching. I'll have you know I walked the Brooklyn Bridge with my daughter just on Sunday, so I'm happy to see it again. Richard, it was great.
I want to make a comment about what you're talking about pertaining to the Brooklyn Bridge. Whenever my son and I went to New York on our first crusade, spiritual crusade, in 1989, there was a major revival going on in the Brooklyn Bridge, or on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge in Brooklyn. And I remember at that time witnessing, I believe it was Malcolm X, or it was somebody in that area at that time, that was making a head start in basically being a public speaker or a communicator in that area. I remember the Brooklyn Bridge just like it was yesterday. It's a beautiful, beautiful, magnificent piece of work. But once more, it's primitive in comparison to the technology and the knowledge that we have today. As I was listening to that individual, that commentator, first thing I thought of was a show coming from Star Trek where Star Trek had to go down and save these whales because they had something to do with planetary alignment or something like that. And while they was down there trying to save these whales, I think it was Scotty that had a industrial accident that fell off of a stairway while they was trying to capture him, and a bunch of doctors was beginning to operate on him just about the time whenever McCoy, the doctor, come in and realized, my God, man, what are you doing? You're using technology in the Dark Ages. And I tend to wonder that that's not the concept that we today are still in not advancing, in not wanting to evolve, in understanding that the things that we have been doing to our planet is damaging. And it's even going to become more damaging tomorrow, and even more damaging the day after tomorrow, and even more damaging the day after tomorrow. I think you pretty well get the picture in the trajectory that we're on. Especially whenever I got out of my vehicle last night and I looked up into the sky, because a lot of times I like to stargaze, and I'm out here in the country and there ain't a whole lot of light, so I get a pretty good view of the stars. And I looked up, I think it was 4 or 5 nights ago, I seen the Milky Way that was just as, not the Milky Way, but the Big Dipper that was just as clear as a bell. But last night, I probably stood out on my deck out here maybe for 2 minutes. In the process of me standing out there and looking up into the sky, I seen at least 8 to 10 airplanes that was either flying south, north, east, or west. And those was just the ones that was visible. Some of them was so high that you couldn't hardly see the light in the cabins, but some of them was a lot lower that you could tell because you could see the light that they was lower. All those chemtrails that they're leaving is a major contributor to these storms that now are raging towards the moisture level growing even higher because the environment above our heads has become hotter, and then whenever it does release the moisture, it releases it in the form of a deluge. I can't emphasize enough about these things, and whenever I see the holidays approaching, regardless whether it's Christmas, regardless whether it's 4th of July, regardless whether it's whatever, and I see these big numbers that these airlines continue to keep pumping out, they're part of the problem. They're not part of the solution to the problem. They actually are the problem. And until our government is willing to put some sort of mandated restrictions upon the rich people that can't just get in their airplane and go fly to Timbuktu because they got the money to do it, until our countries, our government starts moving in that direction, I still tend to wonder if they're all taking this as a joke. Kind of the way that they was wanting to take the Windmill Ministries and using him as a paper tiger, or using him towards him being nothing more than just a monumental figure, or some say there's another word that I'm looking for. I can't think of it right now. But I wanted you to watch this. I wanted to show the back part of that, and then I wanted you to see the first part of this pertaining to what they're fixing to talk about right here regarding China going back to do not throw your pearls before the swine, going back to that Christ said that if they hated me, they'll hate you, going back to the fact that we have been used and abused and taken advantage of. In lots of ways, I stand with Donald Trump in standing strong about all these illegal immigrants and trying to get things back in check, because we have basically had the wind knocked out of our sail, especially since COVID. And you don't think that some of these other bigger countries are going to take advantage of that? Sure they will. Absolutely they will. And when they get to talking about a new emerging Cold War, I think we're already beginning in the phases of the Cold War, a new Cold War image, because of all the psychological, monetary warfare going on towards the tariffs and everything. I think we're already starting to see the beginning phases of that. And like I said, it's just going to go worse and worse and worse. And as countries go to hurting, the smaller countries will be first, but even the larger countries are not exempt from this. As they go to hurting, and as people go to starving, and as things go totally upside down pertaining to their economy and their inflation and everything else, that's whenever you have to worry about an out-and-out assault or an invasion coming from whoever and whatever regarding survival. The world has not seen nothing like what we're fixing to have to endure. And me, as a messenger, it is my job, and I know it probably sounds like I'm a hindrance to a lot of people, but it is my job to give out those warnings and advisories as clear as possible, because one day, whenever I'm standing in front of my Lord and Savior pertaining to the great judgment day, I don't want to hear people walk up to me and say, well, how come you didn't warn us? How come you didn't tell us? How come you didn't put forth effort towards trying to stop all this? Well, I have. And I have done it again and again and again for the past 30 plus years, and hadn't gotten basically no positive response or no support from not only the locals but also the world in general. So basically, what are they still doing to Juby, the founder of the Windmill Ministries? They're still basically, I hate to use this word, but they're still basically slapping him in the face by telling him not only are they non-grateful, but by telling him that they could care less about global warming whenever I see the signs right in front of me again and again and again every day. Which basically turns humanity into a bunch of liars. Do as I say, not as I do. White man speaketh with forked tongue. They're good about talking about global warming and etc. and having these various meetings, but actually seeing them move up onto that, we haven't seen that yet. And I guarantee you, our environmentalists and our scientists and those that are associated with this industry, They are absolutely alarmed at the things that they are witnessing today that they didn't think that we was going to see for probably the next 20 years from now. Well, if these things are alarming today that they didn't think that we was going to see 20 years from now, give or take another year from now, is that going to expand us up to 25 years? And another year after that, maybe 30 years? It's coming down the pike, and it's coming down hard and quick. And we're definitely living in a world that is in steadily decline, and we're definitely living in a world that is evolving. And if we are not smart enough to stay ahead of the game, then we are going to have to look at things like Star Trek did with McCoy, that basically these Homo sapiens down here are living in the Dark Ages. They are living in the Dark Ages whenever it comes to primitive this and primitive that and primitive thinking and primitive techniques and primitive this and that. Just like our military, in thinking that wars are going to be won with battle tanks and ships and basically guerrilla warfare tactics is absolutely ludicrous. And knowing the technology that's out there, knowing that wars could actually be fought by actual robots one day in the future. And whenever I say the future, I'm not talking about 30, 40, 50 years from now. I'm talking about like 10, 8, 7 years from now. That's how quick things are moving. And until people are willing to look at that and respond to that accurately, it's only going to get worse. I cannot be urgent enough in trying to save humanity every day, and it's as if they continue to want to slap God in the face and shake their fist in the face of God and say, "We dare you, we dare you, we dare you." Well, the thing about it is, the dares that they've been doing now for the past 30 plus years that has put us this far behind, it's going to take that much more harder to catch up and to get us put back on the right path. Environmentally, spiritually, economically, socially. I mean, we're seeing a decline even with our children today, that first of all, social media has been so overwhelming to them, it's basically stifled them or burn them out, or some of them's actually taken their lives because of it. We're going to have to get a grip if we're going to get through this storm. Regardless whether you be on this continent or the other 6, we're going to have to get a grip, and we're going to have to plan ahead. And if we don't, we're going to regret it. Please listen to this, please.
And maybe this is not an illogical action for China to take, but my view is for the rest of the world, certainly for Western democracies, Japan, Korea, and others, we shouldn't just be standing by while China builds up its effort to go to war with us. We should be looking at our actions and our trade relationships with China. And unfortunately, for a few decades now, we've been in this age of globalization because China is being so aggressive across the board, because it seems to be preparing for war. We need to be reevaluating our entire relationship with China, including our trade relationship.
And yet it is the second largest economy in the world, and we talk about protectionism. Canada followed in the U.S. footsteps in imposing 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. This goes to your point that they're overproducing and may try and dump those cars in places like the EU and the U.S. They've all joined in on those tariffs.
China has actually made so many solar panels that I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Australia or somewhere, it may have been the UK or the UN or somewhere, where they was actually taking solar panels now and using them for fencing, because the price has plummeted so much because they got so many solar panels that they're basically giving them away. Basically giving them away. We're going to have to realistically go into this as a global network, as a global society, because if we don't, it will be the doom and gloom to us all. We are all socially, economically connected. This is no longer the old world where we were still looking for continents to discover. This is the old way of thinking needs to be branded and thrown away. And I'm not saying that a lot of that stuff pertaining to our memories of the past and what we done, how we done it, just like the building of the Brooklyn Bridge a while ago. I'm not saying that should be overlooked or not recognized, because it should. The men and the women that done what they done during the time that they done it, done an excellent job. It's we, us, that are failing them. They did not fail us. We are failing them because we haven't evolved. We're not growing. We're not learning. We're not doing a checkpoint in all our resources and learning that there are different metals, there are different compounds, there are different things out there that now we can be involved in, rather than the old-fashioned, primitive, dark ages. And I say that regardless whether it be the medical industry, the construction industry, the science industry, even the ministry, preaching ministry industry. And you got to look at it towards it being an industry, a business. They still got the old way of thinking. Fighting against one another in our enterprises is only going to bring that much more destruction to us all, to each and every one of us, because it will be just like a set of dominoes. We are that closely associated with one another now, to where if one major break happens that we can't make up for, that'll drag us down, or China down, or whoever down, it could actually drag the rest of us down along with it, because we are on a different plateau, a different dimension in comparison to what our ancestors was, not in the 1800s, not in the 1900s, but even the 20th century. We're in the 21st century. This is year 2024. Right now, we should be like Elon Musk and have all these other different inventions and ideals that could save time and energy and be so much more less wear and tear, wouldn't produce all this heat pertaining to friction. There's so many things out there that can create different electricity other than oil. Draining the precious resources out of the ground is going to cost humanity their existences of this on this planet. We're going to become distinct, just like the dinosaurs, if we continue on doing what we're doing. And like I said, talk is cheap. You know, I hear talk. I see meetings. I hear conversations. But talk is cheap. And I don't know if the people has become complacent and they just don't want to grow. I don't know if they don't think that they're intelligent enough. I don't know. They're still, as far as I'm concerned, being bewitched. They're being bewitched, and which puts us into the category of being deceived. Once more, you cannot deceive the nations again into Gog and Magog unless you have deceived the world the first time. That's where we're at. And I know I sound like the bad news bearer. I know I sound like a broken record. Oh, here he goes again. Here he goes again, degrading humanity, degrading humanity. Look, I'm not degrading humanity just in the pure principle of degrading humanity. I'm trying to save us all. And if you can't understand that and see that, then obviously you are part of the problem rather than the solution to it.
What do you see as the risks and the rewards in this kind of an economy? Because, you know, this issue of decoupling from China has been out there for a few years now.
Right. So certainly there are risks across the board. For China, they have clearly made a decision that they're willing to face a trade war with the rest of the world in order to basically boost their economy and
they're willing to cut our throats to cut their own. It's almost like a suicide bomber. They're willing to cut their own throats to cut ours. And there's no doubt America has been too lax. towards throwing out its pearls before the swine, especially those that claim to be a true church organization, country, but have allowed for themselves to have done this. Please listen to this. This is very interesting.
And boost their manufacturing at the expense of everybody else. For the rest of us, if we don't react, shame on us. I mean, I'm a Democrat, but I think that President Trump wasn't entirely wrong. He said, hey, China has been behaving in this inappropriate way, but we have let them do it. And certainly for past decades, there was an idea that if we opened up our economies, if we traded with China, China would evolve in a way similar to how Germany or Japan or Korea and others have evolved over time. But that just hasn't happened. When instead what's happened is China has played our openness against us. And that's why there's a growing awareness among Democrats and Republicans alike, and not just in the United States. You mentioned these other countries, that China is abusing the international trade system and forcing the rest of the world, for our own good, to build the kind of walls that nobody wants. Because when we have tariffs, that is certainly a tax on us in the United States. And so, as I said before, the rest of the world is going to need to come together to balance China. And I hope we can do that effectively.
And the Biden administration has been trying, with limited success, I would add, in trying to do this pivot. Biden apparently will be at least a phone call, maybe even a face-to-face. How do you think that should be handled by the White House?
Well, these face-to-face meetings and phone calls and just all communication are very, very much welcome. China and the United States are the two most significant, in many ways, countries in the world, and we have a lot of overlapping interests, so we need to be communicating with each other. At the same time, we just need to be clear that the kind of aggression that you just reported on in the South China Sea, China just this past week violated with a fighter jet Japanese airspace, extreme aggression in the Taiwan Strait, essentially supporting the Russian military, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. These are just unacceptable behaviors, and the rest of the world needs to push back. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking. We have to be talking. We spoke to the Soviets during the Cold War, and even if there is a new Cold War emerging between China and the West, we need to do everything possible to maintain our lines of communication and have off-ramps, because I don't think this is the best path for China. It's probably not the best path for the West, and we need to give China an opportunity to change its ways, stop this kind of terrible aggression, and rejoin, in many ways, or join the community of nations working together to build a better future for everyone.
See, that's exactly what happened to the kingdom of God whenever it allowed for Lucifer, that at one time stood beside Michael, the guardian angel, and given him the leadway, or the power, or the ability to not just do his job appropriately, but basically to become big enough and strong enough to basically start his own league, start his own army, be influential enough that he turned on the kingdom of God. And because of it, the kingdom of God was forced to have to show their ugly hand in proving to this evil demonic spirit that was once born nothing but a liar and a murderer from the beginning. God had to put his foot down. That's the reason why I say a lot of times, sometimes good people has to do bad things, because that's the only way to keep things in check with our order that we have here on planet Earth. And once we start seeing different countries that can no longer validate that and understand that and has the same goals of that, then we are heading, my friends, to a scenario that could lead into something much, much, much worse than World War II. Whenever the bombs went off in Hiroshima and the other part of the world over there, it wasn't that our ancestors wanted to do that. They felt like that it was a must and that they had to do that. It took that before the world finally realized, oh my God, we are self-reliant upon each other, ain't we? And if we continue on the path that we're on, we're just going to destroy one another. Well, that's exactly right. We can butcher one another. We can blow up one another. We can destroy each other. But ultimately, in the end, we're going to be destroying each other. Now, there has to be a better way to the Middle Eastern affairs going on right now pertaining to Hamas and Israel and all the other problems going on over there in the Middle East, as well as what's going on with Ukraine and some of these other countries that are now feeling the bite, and they're feeling it pretty hard. And the thing about it is, as we get further into this, they're even going to feel the crunch even that much more worse. And if the truth be known among the living, if the truth be known, COVID actually come as a warning of an awakening to awaken us. Now, we can look at COVID as it being the worst thing in the 21st century that we've ever had to go through, in which it has been bad. And God bless those who have passed on before us because of COVID. But you have to admit that they're in a much better place because they're no longer having to fight the good old fight down here on planet Earth like the rest of us mortals are having to do. According to the Bible, the planet Earth is going to reach a state of chaoticness that people will want to die and death will flee from them. And I know, especially over here in America, seeing how American people has been spoiled and have been able to do this and do that and get away with this and get away with that. I know whenever I say stuff like that, they snigger and laughing behind my back. I know whenever I tell people what I tell people about the crown of thorns and about me meeting this fleshly Satan and his other 12 disciples over in Martin, Tennessee, a great deal of them want to snigger and laugh. Whenever I tell people about other things, they want to snigger and laugh. Regardless whether it's global warming or the affairs going on with each country. They want to snigger and laugh. But I'm telling you now, it's coming, and it's coming near a neighborhood near you. Now, you can be like Miss Harrison, and you can say, well, we're not never going back. We're not never going back. Well, if you don't go back, you better get ready for the crack. And that crack can come in the form of your own personal home. That crack can come in your community. That crack can come in your country. That crack can come on a national level or an international level. That crack can actually crack the planet Earth to where the Earth opens up according to the Bible, and great locust comes out of it that will torment humanity worse than scorpions. We are dealing with the supernatural that is colliding with the natural. Kind of like McCoy. I can't believe that these doctors are still using these type of dark ages primitive tools to be able to get things done. It's time that the American people and the world growed up. I cannot warm people's milk forever. And I'm not going to put a pacifier in somebody's mouth just to accommodate them because they're not willing to accept the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. Not just bits and pieces of it, but the whole truth. That's why I've been punished. People like Al Gore's been punished. Other people that wanted to speak their piece and tell people that the direction that they're heading in is wrong, they get punished for it rather than being thanked or being rewarded for it. They get punished for it. It is time that our whole concept, our whole thinking has changed. And if we don't change it, my friends, it's coming near a neighborhood near you that will make COVID absolutely look like child's play. That will make COVID on a global scale look like child's play. I can't be no more clear, I can't be no more sincere, and I can't be no more urgent with my message than what it has been since the anointing fell upon my life in the late 80s regarding the Holy Father, the Holy Spirit, and the precious Holy Son of God. the Trinitarian Trinity. I cannot be no more serious than what I am today, other than, I guess, being a nuisance about it. I guess I'm just a nuisance. Like my dad said, Dennis, you remind me of a fly. It keeps flying around, you swat at it, you can't hit it. You keep swatting at it, you keep swatting at it, and you can't hit it. You're just an annoyance. You're a menace to society, is what my own dad said. Well, you know what? Must have been a reason why my dad come back to me, give or take about a week and a half after he died. His soul come back to me in a very, very apologetic form. There must have been something that clicked between here and heaven in some form of judgment, because most people don't have that opportunity of coming back to the living. But he did to me. And he was very, very humbly sorry of what that he either didn't do that he should have done, or vice versa. What he didn't do, or what he did do that he shouldn't have done. And that's the same way with us today. You know, whenever David Jacobs, a good friend of mine, was laying on his deathbed, a brother of Dickie Jacobs, and I looked at him with tears in his eyes as he was basically dying. I think he may have lived another month or so after I went and visited him. But with tears in his eyes, he said, Juby, I wish I would have listened to you. I wish that I done different about you. In other words, the daunting truth had finally awakened him of the facts of what I had been preaching and teaching for all these years. And David Jacobs was man enough to look at me and say, I was wrong, Juby, and you was right. Now, it took a death experience for David Jacobs before he died, before he acknowledged that. It actually took a death experience by my dad before his soul come back to me and acknowledged that. But they did acknowledge that. And there'll be others that will acknowledge the same thing after they go through their passing, that they'll realize that this gentleman that was talking all this stuff was not just bringing this stuff up just to be bringing this stuff up. Pertaining to the crown of thorns, pertaining to the great sword, pertaining to the opening of the seals, pertaining to the two witnesses, pertaining to this physical demonic Satan that is not the actual Antichrist but is the follower of the Antichrist, they'll realize that all this stuff that Juby has been telling them is so. But are you going to do like David Jacobs, or are you going to do like my dad, and are you going to wait until it's too late? Now, there's the $64,000 question. It's kind of like whenever I watched that deal on social media the other day where a pastor was basically degrading the rest of the pastors pertaining to not shepherding the sheep properly, in which I can understand from his perspective the reason why that he would say that. Especially somebody of mine accord that has went through the things that I've went through in the past 30 plus years. I can definitely understand and relate to that. But at the same time, if you look a little deeper, was it really? I mean, yes, the responsibility fell upon to the shoulders of the pastors and ministers and evangelists that refused to acknowledge the truth. But really and truly, did the buck actually stop there, or did it go back to the original concept of humanity? Because if those preachers wasn't preaching what them congregations wanted them to preach, I guarantee you they would have hit the road and they'd have been out here looking for another job. Which, once more, the fault falls upon to the people. The movement that began in 1988 when 9 tapes went to the White House, we still haven't seen the full consequences of the count of it. Just like Donald J. Trump continues to keep telling people that the American people has still not to this day gotten down to 9/11, towards just exactly the who, the what, the when, and the why, and etc., etc., etc. Now they can try to cover it up They can try to be in denial about it. They can try to do whatever, kind of like what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, and what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. They can lie about it, and they can push it to the back burner, and they can say, well, maybe this thing will go away, or maybe if we just put it under the rug and just ignore it, it'll just automatically die out. And that's basically what they have done to me. They want me to die out. They want to play this long-term game in thinking, well, if we give him enough time, he'll just pass away. He'll just go away. He'll fade away. He'll be forgotten in a day or two, and we can all go about our lives towards living the way that we want to live. Really? I'm going to fade away? As many times as I've come close to death, as many times that God has saved my life, I'm not saying that God ain't going to give up on me and tomorrow call me home. Call me out of this hell. But so far he hadn't. So far he saved my life. And so far he's given me the energy and the breath to be that witness, to be that communicator, to be that I guess the right word would be to be that coach towards trying to rally the people in a spiritual way and understanding the things that I understand to be given to them. That once more, the founder of the Windmill Ministries did not fail that ministry. I done what was accorded to me to do. Poor man has poor ways, and I took it to the people, and the people rejected it and denied it. Once more, you can't make a horse drink water. But what God can do, regardless whether I approve or disapprove, he can make the horse regret that it didn't drink the water. That's the part that they usually don't teach you, is the latter end of it. Kind of like, well, you can't take blood from a turnip. No, you can't take blood from a turnip. You sure can. But what you can do is make that turnip's life miserable because it didn't produce what it should have produced. That, my friends, is called true godly justice. And whenever the planet, not just the Americans, but the planet in general, does no longer want to function under those guidelines, under those laws, under those rules, then the planet is heading in the wrong direction. Good luck to each and every one of us as we end this particular program by listening to this individual talking about China and other international, national occurrences that will affect our lives in some form or fashion. And if you don't believe me, just hang around, you'll see it's coming near a neighborhood near you. I'm glad that gasoline has finally went down towards leveling out our inflation, but at the same time, I can also see where they're still not taking global warming serious.
See, obviously symbolic, but still significant in its own way. Jenny Metzl, we'll have to leave it there. Have a great weekend. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
This is Labor Day weekend. Our military soldiers, their sacrifices has not been in vain. The ministers of this great nation has not been in vain. The messengers of God's message has not been in vain. Because anything that we do for God will come back sevenfold in the reward towards it being accurate in its authenticity. I'll get the word out in a minute. For the past 5 years, since I've gotten a hold of social media with my telephone and all these other gizmos and gadgets, I have literally racked my brain with all these different words and all these different spellings and all this other stuff because I was not a business consultant. I didn't even get a high school graduate degree. I didn't even get a GED. I've had to reinvent and relearn just within the past years to be able to communicate and being a communicator to these earthlings. But once you communicate to them and they still don't listen, I'll be like Pilate. I wash my hands. Because at that point in time, Pilate was saying, God, I wash my hands of this. Don't hold me accountable for what the people are wanting to do. Well, I'm going to be just like Pilate. I'm going to wash my hands of it. That way, I'll be freed once I get to the promised land. And God says, son, you done what was required in you to do. You done all that you could do. You tried to rally the people. You tried to gain support. You tried to give them a vision or an ideal that I had given to you to give to them. They didn't want to listen. They didn't listen to Noah. They didn't listen to Moses. They didn't listen to Jesus. They didn't listen to other prophets of God in the Bible. And they probably are going to have a hard time in listening to you because you didn't get that diploma. You didn't get that degree. You didn't go to Yale. You didn't go to Harvard. You didn't buddy up with the Baptists. You didn't buddy up with the Methodists. You didn't buddy up with the Church of God. You didn't buddy up with the Presbyterians. You didn't buddy up with the wide world Pentecostal. That's right. You're absolutely correct. I didn't buddy up with a denomination. That's the reason why the Windmill Ministries Missions is not a denomination. It is a undenominationable entity. Evangelism, getting the message out, being the voice, being the tool, not compromising. I even expressed to my son the other day, I'm fixing to close here, that I was accused back 29, 30 years ago or more, that Dennis, why are you trying to dump the whole load to all these people, kind of like dropping a whole load to a bunch of cows or a bunch of livestock pertaining to being a rancher? Why are you trying to give them the whole load at one time? And I wasn't trying to give them the whole load at one time. Just like right now, I'm not trying to give you the whole load. That's the reason why Jesus said what Jesus said, for I have things to tell you that you cannot accept. And because of it, he didn't waste his time on it. But I'm going to tell you what he did do. He did go to the island of Patmos and he gave John the Revelator those things that he wanted to give him, that now makes up for the final chapter of Revelations pertaining to the War of Armageddon. That's what he did do. And if it takes me going through my lifetime as basically being a Dixie whistler, whistling Dixie, and nobody paying attention to what the things that I got to tell them, and nobody supporting me, and nobody being thankful because of the message that's been given to the messenger, well, that's fine. I've learned to live with this. I went through so many different elevations, and I've evolved in so many different ways and been abused in so many different ways. Actually, death would be a pleasant thing to me, of taking me out of my misery, because this has all been miserable for me to deal with these mortals down here that continues to keep slapping me in the face. It would be a pleasure for me to shut my eyes and never have to worry about opening them up again in this world. But obviously that's not what God had planned. Who am I to try to intercede or compromise on God's planning? All I am is a vessel. And I just pray to God that I'll be that vessel tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the week after tomorrow, and however long that God allows me to live. I just pray that I'll be that vessel in trying to do the best that I can do, in hoping that one day I'll hear God say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. There's no doubt in my mind that because of the message being so anointed, that's one of the reasons why that I have received the type of adversity that I've received, not just coming back to Tennessee in 20 and 14, leading to my brother's death in 20 and 17, but all the above. But all the above. As I've told my son, people are going to find interest in you for one or two reasons. They're going to target you. And whenever they do, they're going to try to either support you and enhance the things that you're a part of, or they're going to be trying to trick you and hurt you and bring you down. And with society being like it is today, I tend to wonder if there's very, very few of those that are actually willing to come on board and try to build something great among themselves and with God than there are those that want to tear it apart and destroy it. Good luck to all of us on this Labor Day weekend, year 2024. God bless America. God bless our troops. And heaven please help us all. Shalom.